Hello, I'm John Craggs and welcome to Lockdown Ghost Stories. This is a collection of fact, fiction and performance stories with a paranormal theme, created during the lockdown. Today's stories come from Denise Wilton, Sebastian Storey, Kitty Pereira, Francesca Mepham, Chris Blenkinsop, and Hatty George. I hope you enjoy, and I'll see you on the other side with details of how you can contribute.
So you found him. And Florence? What about her? Where do I begin? So it began when we found our dream home, Bill and I. It's a beautiful house. Couldn't believe that it could actually be ours. And Florence. She was delightful. She showed us round. She clearly loved the house, and we loved her. Shame she couldn't stay, we thought. So we moved in. She left us a gorgeous drawing of the house and her waving goodbye at the gate. And we really hoped that that was where we were going to have our children, where they'd be as happy as her. But Bill was often working away. I'd be on my own late at night, and the house, it changed. Became cold, strange noises, creaking floorboards, the taps whirring away when I turned them on at night. And then the oddest thing, I could hear children's toys going off in the spare room. I wasn't making it up. It was there. And I could feel the presence of a child around me, running around, laughing, almost taunting me. No, the child that we so desperately wanted. And it just felt like they were there, but not there. Does that make sense? Anyway, Bill came back from a particular long trip away with work, and the house just got very icy cold. We were arguing. I couldn't get pregnant. He didn't seem to be interested in trying. And the noises, they were getting louder. And knocking, people knocking at the door, the wind rustling the trees. I felt on edge. I wanted to get away. I wanted to go on holiday. Bill said no, we couldn't afford it. I just felt trapped. And then, by some miraculous... I got a picture from Florence in the post. She'd remembered the address. She'd lived there for quite a while. It was lovely to hear from her. The picture itself, yeah, that was slightly disturbing. So it was the house, completely engulfed in flames, and a man waving through a window trying to get out. But I just thought, well, that's kids. That's kids' fear, isn't it? But then I started seeing Florence. She kept appearing in corners of rooms, whispering to me, find the missing item. It became a game. Lots of things would go missing. Forks, toothpaste, my necklace. And they would always end up in Bill's coat. So anytime anything went missing, that's where I would go and search for it. But then one day, on searching for a missing earring, I found a letter in Bill's coat. Just said, "I heart you." It wasn't from me. I didn't enjoy those games after that point. I wouldn't play them. Florence was getting angry. She was insisting that I look. And I didn't want to look. I didn't want to find. So then items kept appearing in my way. Knives. Especially when Bill was around. And one day I found myself, I was preparing dinner. I looked down and I was adding in bleach into his food. I woke up one night holding a pillow over his face. And Florence, she was there all the time, goading me, telling me, "He's no good for you. You need a new one, you need a new one. Then I'll get a brother or sister to join me." Bill went away on a trip. I knew he wasn't going away on a trip. I knew he was going away with her. And things were no fun with Florence. She kept whispering, "You know where he is. Make sure you get rid of him when he comes back." And then everything stopped. The sounds stopped. The toys stopped playing. Florence disappeared. And I was just all alone in the house, waiting for Bill, with what felt like an eternity. When he walked through the door, it was like mayhem had gone off. The toys were going. The pipework was exploding. I could hear Florence shouting at me, "Get rid of him! Get rid of him!" And then the knife slipped into my hand. He was telling me he was going to leave me. He was going to leave me in this house. I couldn't have that. I couldn't have that.
Hello, my name's Sebastian Storey, and I just want to say that this is an experience that I had when I was younger. I was about 15 at the time, and yeah, I think ghost experiences are things that you never forget. So this is mine. So when I was about 15, I went round the back of my house and I was holding a very large ice cream with a flake, like the largest flake in the universe. And I was happily eating this ice cream, and I sat down on an old well. We've got an old well around the back of our house. And when I sat down on the old well, it was really odd, because two fingers all of a sudden went like that, and they just ran up the back of my neck. I know that sounds odd and not very paranormal at all. And it, it didn't really freak me out to an extent. But then there was all of a sudden this voice that came from behind me. And this was the weird part, because there was no one in the lane. We have like a lane behind us. but it whispered in my ear, "I lie here." And I was odd. But then I looked below my feet, and there was this gravestone. And, I mean, I didn't know it was a gravestone at first, but basically I took all the dirt off it. And there was like faded writing on it. And yeah, that's one of my experiences. The stone isn't there anymore. My dad took it away quite a few years ago. But it's probably one of the weirdest experiences that I've ever had. Ghosts are in our minds and in our hearts.
One year, my friends and I all went to summer camp. It was one of those back-to-nature type places, but you sleep in cabins and have hot showers and everything. Mostly we were just really glad to get away from our parents for the first time. And yeah, during the day we had adults telling us what to do, but in the cabin that I was in, I was lucky. Our cabin supervisor was named Tina, and she was 18. That seems really young to me now, but when you're 13, an 18-year-old is so mature and so cool. Anyway, her only rule was that if we left her and her boyfriend alone, we could do whatever we wanted. And all my friends were in the boys' cabin that her boyfriend was the supervisor of. The only problem was there was this kid named Kevin that nobody liked. He was so gross and so annoying. He wore the same clothes every day. He never brushed his hair, and he just smelled really bad. And all he did was follow us around talking about stuff that nobody cared about. He just couldn't take the hint that we did not want him there. So he came up with an idea. Everybody likes pranks, right? We were going to pull the mother of all pranks. And by the end of it, he would be in no doubt that we were not his friends and we did not want him there. So we all pretended one night that we were going to go to sleep really early. Kevin fell for it, and he actually fell asleep. And as soon as he's sleeping, Jason dumps a bucket of water over his head. And when he gets up and starts running around, Terry yells at him, "Dude, you have to get out of here, there's a huge fire!" And he just runs out the front door in his pajamas and everything. And then Jamie is waiting outside to dump a load of bugs over him. Like there's beetles and spiders in there and everything. Kimmy was waiting around the corner with a bottle of ketchup. There was this really gross ketchup in the canteen, and it smelled like it had been rotten for at least 10 years. So one day we stole a bottle of it. We were all chasing each other around trying to get it on each other. And she empties the whole bottle on him. So he runs out towards the trees, and that's where Laura has this fake dead body made of sheets and clothes hanging from one of the trees. And he sees that, and he screams like a little girl, and he starts running in the opposite direction. And I'm waiting in the bushes to jump out and go, "Ah!" in his face. And he got so scared he fell on his ass. We forgot to take into account that there was a drop there with a lot of rocks, and he fell over the edge. We all ran back to our cabins because there was no point in getting in trouble. We were just messing around. Not like we meant for it to happen or anything. We didn't find out what happened until the next morning, and the camp counselors found him. They said he hit his head on the rocks. He would have died right away when he hit the rocks, so it's not like us sticking around that night would have helped anything or done anything. And there's no point in us getting in trouble just for a simple little joke. So we just tried to forget about it. A couple of days later, they brought us swimming in the lake. Jason was on the school swim team, so he was showing off. All of a sudden, he started yelling. And of course, we laughed at him because he thought he was playing around. But then he started sounding really scared. And he said it felt like there were hands under the water trying to pull him under. One of the counselors jumped in to swim towards him, but before he could get there, Jason went under the water and he stayed there for a really long time. They made us get out of the lake, and the police came, and by the time they got him out, he was already dead. So 2 people died on that trip, so they cut it short and we all had to go home, which sucked because home was really boring. There wasn't really anything to do. There was this abandoned house we used to go to listen to music and draw on the walls and smoke and stuff. Terry must have gone there by himself one day because it burned down and they found his body in the burnt house. I heard that when they found him, it was like he was trying to get out the front door, but the front door wasn't even locked. I don't actually know if that's true, because you know how people like to make stuff up to make it sound more interesting. But anyway, 3 people died that summer. A couple of years later, Jamie got bitten by a Brazilian wandering spider. I'd never heard of one of those, but they knew it was one of those because when they found his body, it was sitting right there on his face. Kimmy was the one who found him. She called the paramedics. I was talking to her after, and she told me about this idea she had that everybody who was at summer camp that year was going to die because Jason dumped water and then he drowned in the water, and Terry yelled that the place was on fire, and then a building did go on fire and he couldn't get out, and Jamie dumped bugs and a spider bit him. I told her I thought that was crazy and stupid, and we didn't really talk that much after that. Anyway, time went by, and Laura married a guy with a lot of money, and Kimmy got a job in the local factory as a quality control inspector. I'm sorry, but if you knew her when we were kids, you know how funny that was. And as for me, I guess I was a bit of a loose end. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I partied a lot, but I didn't have a lot of close friends. Then one day, out of the blue, Laura calls me. She asked me if I heard what happened to Kimmy, and I hadn't. And she was surprised, because apparently it had been in the news a lot, that I wasn't really one for listening to the news those days. In the factory that she worked in, there were these vats where they made spaghetti sauce, and they found her in one of them, even though they were covered and the openings were really small, and she would have had to try really hard to get in there. But they knew she was alive when she entered the vat because they found sauce in her lungs. I think the word they used was aspirated. So Laura and I got to talking after that, and I told her about Kimmy's theory, and how it wasn't sounding so crazy anymore. I mean, spaghetti sauce isn't that far off from ketchup, is it? And I expected Laura to laugh in my face, because I would have laughed in my face if I was hearing that, but she agreed with me, and she said she thought the same thing. So the 2 of us started hanging out a lot together. She invited me over to her house to help put up the Christmas decorations, and people with a lot of money put up some crazy Christmas decorations. We were putting up this giant inflatable snowman, and it took the 2 of us trying to tie down these ropes, and it was blowing in the wind. Her husband was putting up Christmas lights in an apple tree. Apple tree. Fancy, right? Anyway, we're fiddling with the ropes and laughing, and then we heard him yell. But not just yell. He screamed like I've never heard anybody scream before. We went running over to him, and we saw him with the Christmas lights wrapped around his neck, and he was struggling. He was still alive. And suddenly, Laura just drops. And the second she dropped, the lights around her husband's neck broke and he fell. There's nothing wrong with him. Which actually makes sense if you think about it, because he wasn't there at the summer camps. There was no reason for him to be punished. Anyway, he called the ambulance, but she was gone before they got there. They said it was a heart attack. So that leaves me. But you see, I'm at an advantage because I know what's going on now. I'll save myself no matter what. See, I know he wants me to fall and hit my head. I almost fell in the shower a few years ago, but you can't fall in the shower if you don't take showers anymore. And there's no stairs in my house, and I don't even go outside. So I'm gonna win this. It was just a stupid prank anyway. We were just a bunch of dumb kids. I don't deserve to be punished for that. It was just a stupid prank.
I waited, but you did not. I longed for the sight of your ship through the mist, but it never came. You see, we have a saying in my village. The jewels, they lure pirates, but the noble sailors, they leave them be. I've never understood what it meant until now. It seemed the shiny, pretty rocks, they have the greatest power to capture the most rogue of hearts. Lead them to their peril. The purest of hearts, they escape their fate, their integrity intact. They know just when to leave alone. Just what could they be their ruin? You ruined me. You left me on the edge of the rocks, hoping for your return. I waited, cold and hungry. Not for food, but for your affection once again. A heart of heavy, cruel stone. You had sunk to the deepest corner of the ocean. Vibrant jewel, she caught your eye and your soul. With all the beauty and exuberance a man longs for. She brought you back towards the sun's warmth. And Inverno was so intense, you forgot to return to my shining light. To the one who'd captured your heart, though imperfect, is yours. I took my last breath, uttering, always, not because I would love eternally. I would despise you always. Dr. Randall said he'd never seen such a peaceful sight. I was at peace, as I knew that the rest of your life, you would not. As you take your last breath, you will see my sallow corpse, and regret will fill your lungs. The Jarls, they're lure pirates, but the noble sailors, they leave them be.
It's about 20 years ago. I went to this big Halloween party. I was a volunteer for an animal sanctuary. It was at a disused farmhouse type area. Had all these little outbuildings. Anyway, we had the party, and it was in one of the main barns. While I was there, we heard this bang in one of the lower barns. So 3 of us went down. It was where the dogs were kept, and all the dogs were like barking, growling. Something had really unnerved them. So as we went in, we got the dog treats to quieten them off. We was walking down. There was only one way out and one way in. So if you got to the bottom, you had to come all the way back. So anyway, as we got to the bottom, we handed out the last treats. Nothing was in the barn. There was nothing there. So the other 2 went back to the party. I carried on settling the dogs and then walked my way back up.
As I got back up to the top, some of the dogs were growling again at the bottom end. As I turned round, there was this like headless figure stood there with like what I could describe as a pitchfork. Just stood there. Didn't move, didn't do anything, he just stood there. So I turned round to turn back, because I thought it's just my imagination. It's just a shadow. No, he was still stood there. The dogs were barking again, growling. Really unnerved them. So I was trying to calm the dogs down. So I thought I'd go back and get somebody else. So as I went through the door and pulled the door to, you could hear like pigs squealing. So I opened the door again to walk back in. And the dogs went quiet. And the guy just disappeared. There's only one way in and one way out. And he wasn't at the party. It wasn't somebody playing a trick. Later that night, I asked one of the owners. Apparently that was the old pig barn. And the guy was the old pig farmer. I'd never known that.
Mr. Crooks, sir.
Ah, Florence. So, tonight's the night.
The night, sir.
The night you get to prove yourself to me.
I thought I already had, sir.
No, my child. I'm afraid that was just the inaugural test. That's why you're here now. Living with me.
When do I get to go home, sir?
Don't you worry your head about that, my little songbird. That's for your mother and I to decide. You don't want to upset us now, do you? Good. Please, sit. So, shall we begin? Good. So, let's start at the beginning. When did all this come about?
I don't remember.
Try.
When I was young, the angel spoke to me. Other than that, I was a somewhat unremarkable child.
I doubt that very much.
When I was 15, my mother held a tea party for me. Someone, I can't remember who, suggested table turning. You know when you put your hands on the table and it crashes and bangs, or worse still, flies up into the air? Well, I didn't want to take part at first. But Mother made me. And the table banged and crashed. And then...
Go on, my child.
And then I felt it grab me. I felt his claws dig into my skin and drag me into the air.
You levitated.
It was so angry.
Could you do it again?
I think they'll do it again, yes.
Good. Do it now.
I can't control it. It's not me that
makes me levitate. It's the spirits. The spirits when they're provoked. They don't like being torn from heaven to answer your wishes.
What about Katie King?
She came to me. She promised she'd stay with me for 3 years.
And is Katie King here now?
Always.
Good. I'm afraid I'm going to have to tie you down for this next bit.
What?
I need to make sure you're not faking.
Shut up!
What?
Please go ahead. Carry on.
Struggle against that. Good. Struggle against that. Excellent. Right. Shall we begin?
What do you want me to do?
Something. Anything.
I can't make her perform to you.
Why not me? Everyone who pays gets a show.
I never take payment.
Ah, but your mother does.
What?
Feign ignorance all you like. You both know what you are.
You didn't know. You really are.
Leave me alone.
You're testing my patience. Do something. Anything.
We're not puppets to your will. I can't make her perform to you. She's her own being.
Is she? Or is she just you?
I'm telling the truth.
You did that yourself with your foot.
I'm telling the truth. I'm telling the truth.
You're not fooling.
I'm telling the truth. I'm telling the truth. I'm telling the truth. I'm telling the truth.
Well, I hope you enjoyed today's stories. And whatever your beliefs are in the paranormal, there's always something which we experience and can't be explained. Whether it's something that goes bump in the night, or even seeing someone who isn't there. And we would like your story, fact or fiction. If you'd like to contribute, please send your video over to me at jc.craggs@googlemail.com. Your story needs to be no longer than 10 minutes, please. Well, thank you again for watching, and look forward to seeing you again on Lockdown Ghost Stories. Sweet dreams.